Why someone would want to shoot 3 arrows through this dog and leave it near death is beyond anyone's comprehension. One man who wants to see justice served for this little guy, now called Aerosmith, is Representative Robert Fisk.
We need to do more to make sure this type of thing doesn't happen again.
Fisk is offering a $500 reward to anyone who can help Lewiston police find the person responsible for Aerosmith's abuse. So far, police say, they have few leads because there's no solid evidence. Fisk hopes his offer might convince anyone in the know to come forward and help solve the case. He says he's tired of hearing about animals being hurt and sometimes killed by humans, then watching the abusers legally get away with it.
But you can take a valuable portrait of an animal and ruin it, and that's a felony. You can set your cat afire in this state or run your dog over the snowmobile, and it's not a felony. Now, there's something terribly remiss there.
Fisk is a first-term representative who's determined to make his time in Augusta count for animal rights. At present, penalties in animal cruelty cases in Maine are mostly restricted to small fines. Fisk says he'll work to pass legislation that stiffens laws against offenders and keep an eye on any bills affecting animal welfare. On the side, Fisk is starting up a new organization, tentatively called Friends of Animals.
About animals, brace yourself for this next story. It's about animal cruelty and complaints that the state is not doing enough to stop it.
Well, the complaints are nothing new. Animal lovers have been grumbling about this issue for years. But now state lawmakers are looking into it, and they say they don't like what they're finding. News Center's Sharon Rose reports.
You don't have to look far to find cases of animal abuse in Maine. Animals maimed, severely injured, starved nearly to death. The images are heartbreaking.
We're dealing with a highly emotional issue.
The Maine Animal Welfare Program is the state agency in charge of investigating cruelty cases. Shelley Doak is the director.
Every call we get is inputted into our database and is investigated. It's assigned to a district humane agent or a state humane agent. We cover Fort Kent to Kittery.
I beg her pardon.
Ron Merrifield refutes that claim. He's been the animal control officer in the town of Wayne for 20 years, and he says he's seen the state drop the ball on cruelty cases more than once.
I know 3 cases, bad ones, where they never sent anyone out.
Merrifield outlined those cases in a letter to the State Agriculture Committee. One involved 4 German shepherds tied outside in the winter, 3 starving to death, the 4th already dead, its body frozen into the ice. Since the case happened outside of his jurisdiction, Merrifield called Augusta to report it. And what did the state do?
Nothing. Never appeared on the premises whatsoever. They just won't get off their butt and go out and earn their money. Evidently, they don't care a bit. They don't have a heart for animals, evidently.
And Merrifield isn't the only one who feels that way. Lawmakers on the Agriculture Committee say they've been overwhelmed with phone calls and letters from frustrated citizens, and they have no doubt there are some serious problems with the program. One issue is money. During the budget crunch of the early 90s, the funding for the program was slashed. Now it's funded almost entirely through dog licensing fees. Another issue is staffing. There are only 2 full-time humane agents and 6 part-time agents to cover the entire state. There used to be twice that many. And then there's training. Suffice it to say, the agents don't receive much. But critics say the roots of the problem run even deeper. The director of the Maine Animal Control Association says it's a matter of attitude.
The attitude that animal welfare has is that they do their enforcement through education. Well, the problem is there's a difference between enforcement and education. And you can only educate so many people for so long before you have to start enforcing the laws that we have.
Bob Fisk, the head of the group Maine Friends of Animals, agrees, but he says in order to have stronger enforcement, the whole system needs to be revamped. Right now, animal welfare is part of the Division of Animal Health and Industry within the State Department of Agriculture. That division has a lot of other responsibilities. They're listed here on the department's website: testing milk, inspecting dairy farms, monitoring livestock for diseases. The investigation of animal abuse is barely noted.
But it really needs to be looked at thoroughly all the way through, and then we think a whole new structure put in place.
It's unlikely the program will be taken out of the Agriculture Department. Agriculture Commissioner Robert Speer says he's not about to let that happen. But he does admit some significant changes may need to be made.
As the commissioner, I am willing to take a good look at this, and if there are areas to improve upon, then we want to improve upon them.
Animal advocates say they hope those improvements come fast. They say while people are talking, there are still countless animals out there suffering and waiting for help. Sharon Rose, News Center.
Commissioner Speer has been meeting with various groups as well as members of his own staff to come up with solutions. He plans to submit a report to the Agriculture Committee during its next meeting a week from today. Charges by animal control officers and animal welfare advocates now have the attention of Maine lawmakers, who grilled Doak for about 2 hours today. News Center's Chris Rose was at the State House for today's hearing. He's in our newsroom now with more. Chris?
Pat, animal control officers, shelter operators, and other advocates say the state agency is slow to respond to abuse cases, always seems tied up in red tape, and in some cases doesn't respond at all. Now members of a legislative subcommittee are taking notice.
And I didn't like what I heard. The case where one dog was dead and the other 3 were on death's door, you know, that just, to me, was not handled appropriately.
Lawmakers say they have reams of materials highlighting problems with the state's animal welfare program. One member of the subcommittee said the agency seems concerned with working with abusers to try to correct the problem when it should be using the enforcement tools it has to remove animals from abusive situations. But Director Shelley Doak defended her office, saying she does the best she can with the staff and resources she has.
Our critics suggest that we're not enforcing cruelty laws. This is false. We investigate on average over 500 complaint calls annually. To suggest otherwise is simply unfounded.
Several lawmakers on the committee said they want to help fix the system, but they can't do that until the director admits there are problems.
Can we move forward on this if there's still just a denial that there's a problem?
Former State Representative Robert Fisk says the hearing was a long time coming. As head of the group Maine Friends of Animals, he speaks for many animal advocates when he says the entire system should be revamped.
They could come up with a number of quick fixes, and they will be positive, but I think the public, and I think we'll revisit this again unless we do something more significant.
Now, Maine is only one of 2 states where state government is in charge of investigating animal abuse cases. Should that change? Well, that's one of the issues the legislative subcommittee will be looking at when it meets again in November. Pat?
All right, Chris, thanks a lot.
In Maine. WGME News 13's Amy Sinclair has the story.
This is a picture of them out in the wild where they should be.
A herd of paper elephants served as a backdrop while proponents of the proposed elephant ban trumpeted their cause in the Hall of Flags.
We dress them in hats and tutus, and it's time to stop.
Bill's sponsor, Representative Chris Muse, says it was his favorite constituent, 7-year-old daughter Regan, who asked him to introduce the bill.
Thank you.
And she was the first to testify.
I have never been to a circus with animals, but I have seen them on TV. And I have driven past the main mall and seen the elephants chained in the parking lot. I don't think any animal should be treated that way. It's just wrong.
Supporters showed videos documenting elephant mistreatment and argued that the circus is no life for an elephant.
If you go to a circus and look at these animals, they truly are half dead in body and totally dead in spirit. The elephant in the circus does not act like an elephant in the wild.
As written, the bill wouldn't prevent elephants from living in Maine zoos. It would, however, make it illegal to bring them here as part of a traveling circus. If lawmakers approve this measure, it would be the first state law of its kind in the nation.
News Center Susan Kimball has more.
It all started with a 7-year-old named Regan, who happened to see some elephants at a circus.
They were bleeding on their ankles. I didn't like that one bit.
Regan and her dad, State Representative Chris Muse, did some research and got in touch with elephant specialist Jane Garrison. She gave them an earful.
Once they capture a baby elephant, what they do, and I witnessed this myself in Africa just this past year, they chain the elephants down by all 4 legs. They deny them food, water, and sleep. And what they're doing is a method called breaking the spirit of the animal.
This videotape, provided by animal activists, shows circus elephants confined, chained, and abused with a spiked stick called a bullhook.
They are trained by the use of physical force. They are chained by their legs where they can't even take one step the majority of their lives. And they're stuffed in the back of train cars and boxcars and shipped from city to city.
This elephant expert says circus trainers use sharp tools and punishing methods to get the animals to entertain. She says the cute tricks and exhibitions that people enjoy so much are just an illusion.
And then you see an elephant in a circus, and yeah, they'll balance on their head or stand on a ball because a trainer is holding this, and they're fearful.
The 7-year-old girl who inspired the bill says she was sad and grossed out when she saw elephants at a local circus.
I saw their ankles bleeding. I saw them chained up. They weren't eating anything. They were hollering. They were yelling. Some were crying.
Regan's father is the legislator sponsoring the circus elephant bill. He knows it is difficult for most people to take it seriously.
The people who think this is a silly proposal are the people who aren't aware of the facts, who haven't seen firsthand what goes on with these animals, who haven't seen them beaten, abused, who haven't seen them rampage.
An elephant expert testified 53 people have been killed since 1990 from rampaging elephants, and more than 100 people were injured. But many circus and zoo owners argue those were rare and unfortunate accidents. They insist their animals are well cared for by trained professionals.
Say the stories of abuse and mistreatment of elephants are greatly exaggerated, and there's no need for this bill to become law.
But this room full of people at the legislative hearing disagree. They say elephants belong in the wild, not performing tricks in a circus tent. In Augusta, Susan Kimball, News Center.
Beth Shelburne, R.D. Song. This is the News at 9.
There was an unusual protest outside a Maine courthouse today. Half of the demonstrators were dogs seeking justice for a four-legged friend named Bandit. NECN's Amy Sinclair has more from Alfred, Maine.
The
There was no walk in the park for these dogs this morning. They and their owners were on a mission.
We need to send a message that animal cruelty will not be tolerated, and if you do, if there's other Michael Morons out there, they may think twice about it.
You arraigned Mr. Michael Morin.
Michael Morin of Biddeford was arraigned in York County Superior Court on an aggravated animal cruelty charge for allegedly slitting the throat of a rat terrier named Bandit belonging to Ron Pelletier.
Still very emotional for you.
It is. It is. It's one can accept death naturally. One can accept stupid accidents when a dog gets hit. But to have gone to my truck and seen what somebody had done to him based on a lie, basically there is an incredible amount of evil out there.
Pelletier found Bandit covered in blood and dead in the back of his truck here at Bentley's Saloon back in June. The motive? Morin believed Pelletier raped his girlfriend. Pelletier strongly denies those allegations, and no charges were ever filed. Leaving the courtroom with his lawyer, Morin refused to comment on what happened that night.
Morin has no comment to make.
These animal rights activists say while Maine has strong laws on the books, animal abusers rarely do jail time. They plan to keep the pressure on in this case, hoping that Morin will get the maximum penalty.
If people are not concerned that it's just a dog, they should keep in mind that 95% of people who abuse animals typically end up abusing either spouses or children.
While Pelletier is hoping Morin will be convicted and spend the full 5 years behind bars, he says he isn't optimistic.
If I'm lucky, if he even gets found guilty, we'll get a year maybe, you know? And that to me is really inequitable and unjust.
For now, he's finding solace from fellow dog lovers who understand the enormity of his loss and why he's so determined to seek justice for Bandit. In Alfred, Maine, Amy Sinclair, NECN.
Fair bear hunting has launched a statewide ballot initiative to halt the hunting of bear using bait, dogs, and leg hold traps. Bill Green is in our newsroom now with more on this. Bill?
Good evening, Cindy. Maine Citizens for Fair Bear Hunting is attempting to gather 75,000 signatures by February 2nd. The leader of the campaign is Robert Fisk of Portland. He's a former legislator from Falmouth and an animal protection advocate. He believes the current methods of hunting bear in Maine are unfair.
It's just, there's no sense of fair chase. In all three incidences, you're killing the animal at point-blank range. The traditional pursuit of an animal in the Maine hunting tradition is just not there.
Those types of hunting are inhumane. Legislation to ban such practices has failed in the State House before, Fisk says, because of pressure from the Sportsmen's Alliance of Maine.
A poll commissioned on the topic revealed that 70% of Maine voters are against these cruel and unethical practices. Yet a handful of legislators and a special interest group can and have buried this issue and thwarted the will of the people. That's precisely why we opted to use the initiative, the referendum process, to give the people of Maine the opportunity to decide the issue.
That would make it illegal to hunt bears using bait, traps, or hounds went before lawmakers on the Inland Fisheries and Wildlife Committee today in Augusta. It was supposed to be a public hearing where both sides of the issue could say their piece. But as NewsCenter's Chris Ficini reports, the chief supporters of the bill refused to testify today because they believe the committee has already made up its mind.
We truly and honestly believe that it would compromise our ability to effectively manage Maine's bear population.
Inland Fisheries and Wildlife officials and members of several sportsmen's groups told lawmakers why it would be a bad idea to ban hunting bear with bait, traps, or hounds. A handful of bill supporters also testified.
Shooting a bear after you've trained it through jelly donuts to come to you is not a sport.
But chief supporters of the measure refused to testify before this committee. In a press conference prior to the public hearing, Maine Citizens for Fair Bear Hunting accused lawmakers on the Inland Fisheries and Wildlife Committee of being biased.
We respect the constitutional provision to be here today in the legislative process, but we also know the Good Old Boy Network is very much alive and well in the management of Maine's wildlife,
and we see no purpose in taking part in it.
Committee members called the accusations a publicity stunt.
I think we're legislators. We're sworn to represent our districts and represent the people of the state of Maine, and we'll do that.
Regardless of the rhetoric, if the committee does kill the bill, Maine voters will still have the final say at a referendum in November. In Augusta, Chris Fascini, News Center.
Question 2. Voters will be asked whether they want the state to enact a ban on bear baiting.
Doug Cook is live in our Portland newsroom with a closer look. Doug?
Jeff and Tori, bear baiting, as it's defined in question 2, is the practice of using bait, dogs, or traps to hunt bear. It'll be up to you, the voter, to decide whether those methods should be banned. The pictures supplied by the group in favor of the ban are compelling. Black bears caught in traps. If we were to let this scene play out unedited, you'd see the gunman actually pull the trigger. The group Maine Citizens for Fair Bear Hunting is using this imagery in its political ads, saying the methods at issue here, using bait, dogs, or traps, are inhumane.
We have a situation in the state where we have 3 practices that are very cruel. It's needless animal suffering, and in conjunction with the fact that it's a very unsporting practice, very unfair, unethical form of hunting.
Beyond that, Fisk says no human intervention is needed to control the bear population. The opposition, Maine's Fish and Wildlife Conservation Council, disagrees.
If we lose these methods, we're not going to be able to kill as many bears, and the population's going to continue to grow. Even with these methods, we've seen the population grow nearly 30% since the early 1990s.
The opposition's ad says those methods are also needed to minimize conflicts with people, and Maine's Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife points to the 300 black bear nuisance calls it took last year.
And so you're getting more bears visiting backyards, you're getting more bear vehicle accidents, but all those associated troubles with a growing population.
So if we're going to have nuisance problems with bears, I suspect it'll be no more than like we have nuisance problems with deer or raccoons. To bring this into a scare tactic that all of a sudden we're going to have dangerous bears in the backyard threatening families and killing pets, I think is absurd.
The anti-ban group concedes no one in Maine has ever been killed or seriously injured by a black bear.
Yeah, it can be a problem. Is it a problem here? No.
Question 2 includes an exception saying those 3 methods could be used if they were needed to protect property, public safety, or for research. Jeff.
According to Fish and Wildlife, Maine has 23,000 black bears. Each year, hunters kill about 4,000 of them. 90% of those bears are taken with bait, traps, or dogs. Biologists say without those methods, bear hunting becomes too difficult.
If this ban passes, surveys have shown that about 90% of the non-residents that come to Maine to hunt will no longer come here to hunt.
Those hunters spend millions in Maine, but the group supporting question 2, Citizens for Fair Bear Hunting, says those hunters would not be a great loss.
These are basically out-of-state trophy hunters who the primary reasons they come into the state is to kill a black bear as quickly as possible so they can take home a bear head or a bear rug. I don't think Maine wants to be associated with those types of practices.
Those opposed to banning baiting, trapping, and hounding are trying to remind voters that question 2 is not about ethics. But those in favor of the ban are standing by their #1 argument that those 3 methods are unethical.
The word hunt means to pursue. And if you don't have any pursuit, then it just becomes killing.
Killing that state game officials say is necessary to manage Maine's bears. In Augusta, Ben French, News Center.
What some hunters warn could be Maine's last bear hunt began today. But if a November referendum passes, this could be the last time hunters are allowed to use bait, traps, and dogs. Groups supporting the ban call those practices cruel and inhumane, but state wildlife officials say they're the best way to manage the bear population. News Center's Vivian Lee has the story.
15-year-old Ryan Nyer is about to embark on his first bear hunt. He feels the proposed ban on bait, traps, and dogs won't work here in Maine.
The terrain, I mean, a lot of these places like Pennsylvania, there's no hills, so you can see bear a mile away, and they're not going to know you're there. Here, you've got about 400 yards at most.
These hunting methods are extremely cruel. They make a mockery out of the concept of fair chase, and they demeans the Maine outdoor image.
The group is working with hunters to pass a referendum which would ban the long-time bear hunting practices. They say pre-baiting a bear for days, using dogs to run a bear down, or using traps or snares is an inhumane and unethical form of hunting.
These fed bears that are almost trained in a way come to these sites and they actually just pot shoot them as though you would shoot your dog eating out of a dish that you had been feeding for 30 days.
The facts: voters across America have outlawed baiting, trapping, and high-tech hounding. Fair bear hunting has thrived, and public safety has been protected. Take Colorado's word. The passage of the initiative has had no detectable adverse effects on bear hunting or bear management. Question 2 would still allow officials to eliminate nuisance bears. Vote your conscience. Vote the facts. Vote yes on 2.
And today, the group that brought that issue before voters says the department and the governor's office aren't playing fair with voters.
The number of bears in the...
They're called Maine Citizens for Fair Bear Hunting, and what they want is a stop to the practice of bear baiting. That's when hunters use traps, use dogs to run bear down, or use food to attract bears into a clearing. The group says that's not hunting at all, that the bear has little chance of escaping. But it's a practice that officials with the State Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife say is necessary to control Maine's bear population. A few months ago, those same experts joined the governor at a news conference urging Mainers to vote the referendum down. And that is the problem, according to bear baiting opponents. They say the state is spending taxpayer dollars in the form of employees and resources to defeat the referendum.
We strongly oppose the expenditure of tax dollars, our members' tax dollars, my tax dollars, by the governor's office and by the Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife to influence the debate on the referendum.
Number one.
Today, the group sent letters to both the governor and Inland Fisheries and Wildlife detailing what they claim is improper work by state employees to help the Sportsmen's Alliance of Maine and other referendum opponents sway voters.
Because there are people that are in favor of this referendum who also pay taxes, and their tax dollars aren't being used to present their position by a state agency, and that's what makes it wrong. They're not just defending the status quo. They're going beyond that to defeat a citizen's initiative, and that they cannot do.
Leader of the Humane Society is firing back at opponents of the proposed bear trapping ban. Last week, a group called the Maine Fish and Wildlife Conservation Council took aim at those pushing for the ballot proposal. It would ban baiting, trapping, and using dogs to hunt bear. The anti-ban group says the Humane Society is an out-of-state group trying to oppose its influence here in Maine. But the Society's director, who was in Maine over the weekend, says plenty of Mainers agree with the ban.
There are 3 times more Humane Society members in Maine than there are members of the Sportsmen's Alliance of Maine. Our members want us involved in this issue because they believe that baiting and trapping and high-tech hound hunting of bears are inhumane and unsportsmanlike.
Pacelli also disagrees with the council's claim that the Humane Society has hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars to fight for the ban. He says his side is the one being outspent.
In a long time, the debate over plans to change bear hunting.
Both sides are airing graphic television ads and making allegations and counter-allegations about dirty campaign tactics. WGME News 13's Greg Lagerquist reports on whether the ads are something the average voter can bear.
This Vote Yes on 2 ad features video of an actual bear struggling in a trap before the kill.
Oh my God, he's gonna get the babies, John.
This Vote No ad features a real phone call about a bear going after a baby, only near the end revealing the baby is a moose. Each side says the other is being nasty.
A number of their ads have a lot of misinformation, exaggerations, deceptions, and this last one, though, really crosses the line.
Be another bear hunt referendum in Maine.
Bill Green set out to find the answer.
Last Tuesday's referendum was so close, many people expect another initiative is heading your way. We'll talk about it coming up on the Green Outdoors.
That would have outlawed bear trapping and bear hunting with dogs and bait.
The vote was close enough that many people think the Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife should change some hunting and trapping practices. Newsletter's Bill Green spoke with both sides of the referendum to see what's next in the Green Outdoors.
Most sportsmen are relieved that the Fair Bear referendum failed, but it was close.
I think as a department we would have been thrilled with just a half-a-point victory, because what it does, it allows us to keep our bear management program in place. Without it, we would have had a lot of problems dealing with nuisance bears.
Robert Fisk led the referendum effort. He says he did it because the Inland Fisheries and Wildlife Department and its legislative committee only listened to a small group of sportsmen.
Those people are politically, personally, ideologically, and financially connected, and they block any form of legislation that has any form of restriction on any hunting practice, and that forced us to go to a referendum process.
It was an exhausting and expensive campaign for both sides. Each is leery of what will happen next. Fisk says his next step is to try to change the configuration of the legislature's Fish and Wildlife Committee.
But certainly we'll be back in the legislature. I think there's enough people now that recognize these practices, and we've got to move along from this idea that you cannot have any hunting restriction of any kind.
There are several issues generated by the referendum that will get legislative attention when lawmakers return to the State House in January.
Every day in Maine, there is a crime being committed that you can help stop. Maine Friends of Animals needs your help in their Dogs Chained for Life campaign. Dogs left outside month after month suffer from sporadic feedings, overturned or frozen water bowls, inadequate shelter, extremes in weather, and no veterinary care. These dogs eat, drink, urinate, defecate, and sleep in the same confined area with little or no human contact. Some have frozen to death. Others have just died of a broken heart. It is not only cruel, but it is now illegal in the state of Maine to not provide a dog with adequate shelter and care while being continuously tethered. Do you know of a dog chained for life that needs better care? Call or email today to find out how you can help, or visit the website on your screen.